Greetings, this is Obi-Wan Kenobi, and I have drifted into the underworld. The Star Wars underworld. I have a bad feeling about this.
Here we go. We must go to the lower levels. The underworld.
You've taken your first step into a larger world.
You're after something.
Ben.
Since I've started the underworld, I've met so many great friends.
Chris.
I grew up in the 1990s, and mall packaging is nostalgic for me.
Dominic.
What I love most about Star Wars is that it's fun, and it's all-round good times.
So, this is where the fun begins.
May the Force be with us.
This thing really moves!
I like this!
I can't believe you came all this way to see me.
What's up, Star Wars fans, and welcome back to another episode of the Star Wars Underworld podcast. We are your source for the latest breaking Star Wars news, discussion, and reviews each and every week. And this week on the show, we're talking about episode 4 of Andor, Aldhani. We're super stoked to get right into it. My name is Chris, and joining me is my good friend, Mr. Dominic Jones.
Hello, Chris. Hello, Ben. Hello, everybody. And yes, it is just Chris and Ben this week. I didn't forget Hannah again. She's just not here for this show. So, hello, everybody. Very excited to be back talking Andor. I just want to say something, for everybody who's watching live, you might have noticed that, usually I wear a Toronto Blue Jays hat and a Star Wars shirt. Well, today I'm shaking it up and I'm wearing a Toronto Blue Jays jersey and a Star Wars hat. I got my Clone Force 99 baseball cap on. I nearly called it a Pod Force 99 hat earlier, only to realize that that's probably when I'll wear it most is when we're recording that show. But just giving the Bad Batch some love, even in this Andor time. But yeah, very excited to talk about this episode. But I was confused at the start of the episode. I couldn't understand where in the timeline it was because they didn't tell me how many years before the Battle of Yavin it was. I didn't know. I will say I did enjoy hearing from everybody, whether you agreed with me or disagreed with me about the whole BBY thing. But one thing I love about Star Wars is that we can have these ridiculous disagreements and discussions about stuff. And whether you like the BBY or you're with me and you think, maybe we can come up with something a little clearer. It's a little silly either way. So looking forward to getting into Andor. It's going to be a great show.
Fantastic. Actually, apparently you did forget Hannah because she's in the comments.
Well, she's in the chat.
Couldn't get away with that one.
Oh, good.
And that other voice you hear and face you see, it's the founder of the Star Wars Underworld, Ben Hart, the Star Wars guy.
How's it going, everybody? Okay, this week I actually I have a bit of a story time, a bit of an update, and a bit of a question for you guys.
Okay.
So years and years ago, I asked the question, probably on this podcast, but I know definitely on social media. I was like, hey, I'm finally ready to buy a next-gen game console. And I want to know, what should I buy? What should I buy? An Xbox or a PlayStation? It was probably Xbox, probably PlayStation 3 or 4 at that point. I wasn't even
It was PlayStation 2, Ben. Let's be real.
No, I have one of those. I'm covered.
No,
That's my
no. What you're remembering is that the decision that you made, I remember, was that you were going to buy a Wii. This was about 10 years after the Wii was a new thing.
Right. So like I thought about it. Of course, that question lingered for a while. I thought, it's just a throwaway poll. No, people to this day come up to me like, what'd you choose? What did you get? And I'm like, I haven't got anything yet. Leave me alone. I don't know how people remember that because I barely remember it. It hasn't even popped up on my Facebook memories, but I have made a decision. Finally. And I'm just going to go say neither.
Oh, looky there.
There you go. So my question is, for the people listening, this is the Nintendo Switch I'm holding. What game should I buy for this thing? Other than Lego Star Wars, okay? I know I'm gonna get that one, okay? That's a given. what other games? Because I've heard a lot of recommendations, but I would like to hear from you guys. Let me know what I should get. And no, I'm not getting an Xbox or a PS5. Okay, I'm
saying, Ben, the chat is still telling you should go with one or the other. You should.
For the record, like back in the day, the PlayStation won by a landslide. Even the Xbox keep coming at me. Like y'all lost. I'm sorry, you lost the contest. But now you both lost. So sorry, I got what I wanted.
There you go. Congratulations. Congratulations, Ben. You are asking the absolute wrong person for recommendations if you're asking me, which I know you're technically asking the listening audience. Because I'm like, I think Mario Kart would be fun. And, I don't think you need to be recommended with that one. Yeah, look. Maybe they should make an.
For the record, if you see me like staring, like if I'm just like sitting like this, you know what I'm doing.
We'll know that
to the podcast.
Yeah, we'll know that you've gotten bored of talking about Aldhani.
Oh God, here he goes again about BBY. I'm just gonna sit over here.
I have nothing more to say about BBY now or ever. I learned that lesson. Yeah, okay, but before we talk about the episode, I had a realization right before we started recording because the episode's called Aldhani, and that's also the name of the planet in there. And we know that like Star Wars planets, they pull their names from different places. Wobani was mentioned last week, and that was in that was in Rogue One as well, and it's a respelling of Obi-Wan Kenobi. It's where it's an anagram. That's the word of Obi-Wan Kenobi. And there's other ones out there. I think it might have just hit me where Aldhani came from, because it's kind of a joke that we sometimes make on the show. ALDHAN. We'll leave the I out of there.
Yeah.
Ald, Han, Alden, Ehrenreich, Han Solo, Aldhani. You smash it together. There's the title.
And at the end you have Annie, which of course is a Star Wars thing, and then Annie is an anagram of Ian, which is Han.
And it's just all comes back together.
Han, they pulled the I from Harrison. So you got the whole just smashing together. So, a spoiler alert: Han Solo's going to show up in episode 5.
There you go. There you go. Tony Gilroy said there'd be no.
It's going to be Alden Ehrenreich, but Harrison's face will be CGI'd onto.
Tony Gilroy told us there would be no superfluous cameos. He was lying. Every episode, we're going to get one from here on out. This is how we get there.
Bait and switch.
Aldhani, Aldhani. That's what I'm calling it from here on out. Aldhani. That's also what I'm calling Alden Ehrenreich's Han Solo. That's Aldhani. And not to be confused with Harrison Ford in The Force Awakens, who's old Hani.
Oh dear. If you want more of this, subscribe.
What's that? The subscriber numbers are going down. Oh.
Whoop. No, the subscribe button doesn't work like that. That is not how the subscribe button works. You click it to subscribe, and then you don't click it again. That's how it works.
There you go.
If you want to click another button, hit the super chat button, or hit the become a channel member button, or go hire a bounty hunter to hunt Ben down on social media to join our Discord. Those are the three options.
I don't have people coming up to me in real life. How do I get into the Discord?
That's gonna happen.
Yeah, you're gonna be in the Star Wars aisle one day, and so you're gonna have like that Black Series figure you've been looking for months in your hand, and you're like, yes, finally, and someone's just gonna tackle you and be like, tell me how to get to the Discord, and the figure will fall under a shelf and never be seen again.
And then
a tragedy
will not be let into the Discord.
All right, let's talk about Andor, season 1, episode 4, Aldhani, written by Tony Gilroy this one was written by Dan Gilroy, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, written by Dan Gilroy. There's too many Gilroys out there. and directed by Susanna White. We'll begin how we always do, go around the table, give some initial impressions. And Ben, we won't ask you for a link to the Discord right now, but we will get you to go first.
I can do. So if you listen to what I said last week about this show, you might consider that I was kind of on the fence about this show after watching the first 3 episodes at least once. And I think that was probably accurate to say, because it was a hard transition into the show, trying to get used to what it is. I can confirm that I got back and watched the first 3 episodes again a couple times and really enjoyed them. Especially the 3rd episode, I think, was fantastic. This episode 4, I think, is the show that got me into the show. That really made me fall in love with Andor, I think, officially. It's just, I think, I don't even know what makes me say this, honestly, because it's hard to put my finger on all the things that I loved about this episode. But I think this is one of the best episodes of Star Wars TV we've gotten in quite a while. And I've loved most episodes of Star Wars TV, but this one really hit all the right buttons and all the things, and manages to expand the scope of this show while also still managing to keep the focus on Cassian Andor himself. Just amazing. I mean, just the visuals, everything, of course, just amazing. Going back to Coruscant was a delight. Getting more into the Rebels, getting Mon Mothma finally, seeing Lutheran do his double life Batman thing. Come on. I mean, this episode has so much to offer. But I will say right off the bat, I love this one.
Nice. Chris, what about you? Your initial thoughts on Aldhani?
As the show continues, I'm just going to get more and more sad that for some reason, of all of the shows, they've decided to set a hard limit for how long this show can go for. Why? No other Disney Plus Star Wars show has, nor anything on Disney XD, let me extend it backwards into that, had shown the potential legs for a very long run. It is building so slowly yet so strongly that you have the feeling that this show could be 100 episodes and it could work. And just knowing in the back of my head that not only are there only going to be 24 episodes, but this current time period only has 12, and then the other 12 are just 4 other time periods. That's just messing with me right now, because I'm like, wow, this is such a strong foundation for a kind of Game of Thrones level of complexity with all these different characters and planets and things going on, and they're not related yet, but they're going to be, and that's so interesting. So that's kind of the negative side to it. It's actually too good. This show is too good. It's making me mad.
Tony Gilroy making the shows too good.
But with that being said, you got to think they know what they're doing. And when you have a limited amount of episodes, I thought they would be able to do this with Kenobi, but I guess not, in my opinion. But when you have a limited amount of episodes,
Kenobi's perfect.
You're gonna know.
Just have to say that every time. Every time somebody undermines it, it's perfect.
You're gonna know what to put, in each episode, because you have the whole thing mapped out to the very end, and so that makes sense. So the pacing is brilliant. So yeah, I had a very positive reaction to this episode. I watched it piecemeal, waiting for work to start, on break. I may or may not have watched it at one point in the bathroom at work. I may or may not have watched it for 5 minutes.
Gotta do what you gotta do.
Best way to watch it.
I did everything I could.
The way it was meant to be seen.
Both because I was excited to watch it as soon as possible, and also because I wanted to spend the last half of the day scrolling through social media and needed to get the show watched so I could scroll through social media without being spoiled. And then after work, I then watched it immediately again because I wanted to make sure I didn't miss anything from all the pausing and all these things. So yeah, I just kept, shaking my head every 5 minutes, like, oh my gosh, I can't believe they're doing this. Like, this is great. And gosh, no fan service in this show. Well, yeah,
Yeah.
It might, maybe from a certain perspective, like, yeah, there's no Darth Vader, going crazy in the hallway like Rogue One. But like, for me, all the stuff in Coruscant and like the ISB, like that is fan service. Like that's the Star Wars that we have known about for a while and have wanted to see more. That's literally fan service in a sense. So that was really, really cool. I appreciated that so much more than Hosni and Prime or so about their random place. So I thought that was fantastic. So I probably could actually monologue for an hour about this, but that's not how our show's structured. So I'm just gonna stop and wait till we talk about certain things, because I'm very excited about so many aspects of this episode and just so much about this. Like, it was great.
Yeah, they've done, and especially in this episode, they've done such a good job at weaving in references and nods and homages to existing Star Wars, that this story feels like it is has firm footing in the Star Wars galaxy, without one, making those references seem forced, or two, overshadowing the actual plot and the actual story that's being told in these episodes. It's a real tightrope to walk, and this show has done a brilliant job so far at doing it. And for me, like the big the reference where I went, oh yeah, no, we're fine here. This is Star Wars, is when Luthen mentions the Rakatan Empire. I'm like, that is there is a deep cut. Like, oh my god, like that's one of those ones where I'm like, okay. All right. Tony Gilroy may be the guy who doesn't like Star Wars, but is making Star Wars. There are enough people that he's surrounded himself with enough people to, when he needs a reference, they can give him a good one like this.
We would have to wait for Leslie Headland for something like that. Maybe they're talking. Maybe, they're in the same office.
Well, I believe production for Acolyte is in the UK and production for Andor's in the UK. Maybe they're down the street, or maybe before shooting during one of the lockdowns, a Zoom was arranged with like Kathleen Kennedy, Leslie Headland, and Tony Gilroy, and they're like,
that's a good freaking writer to be writing something, to maybe not have a deep knowledge, but be like, yo, I'm gonna just put some brackets here, insert nerdy thing, and then have somebody fill in whatever word.
I think that's literally the story group's job, is they get a script from someone like Tony Gilroy and says insert nerdy thing here, and they look up something and they're like, you know what, the Rakatan Empire, let's put those in. Let's mention that. People will lose their minds over it. Yeah. So yeah, I love it, and yeah, I also wanted to mention the pacing of the show, because I'm loving it too, and like you, Chris, I get sad when I think about the fact that this is only going to be 2 seasons, and I get even sadder when I read the interviews with Tony Gilroy and Diego Luna, where they said originally it was going to be 5, and then it was going to be 3, and that was just 2.
Oh my gosh, I'd be flipping out if it was the case that it was still 5 episodes. I would be like as excited as I was or 5 seasons, not 5 episodes. Oh gosh, I would have been excited as I was like 10 years ago when we knew that there was definitely going to be 5 seasons of the Clone Wars.
Yeah, right.
I was like, oh my gosh, this is great. I can invest myself in the show. I don't have to worry about it just ending randomly. Of course it did, but after thankfully 5 seasons in the original quota from Cartoon Network. So, but so yeah, it's like, it's frustrating. But here's the thing is, maybe we will get 2 years of Diego Luna, and we will get 2 years of Cassian, but maybe we'll get more from some of the other people working on this show, and that would be cool.
If the show continues to be the success that it is, if it brings in the numbers, then I think more shows in this style will be commissioned, much in the same way that the Mando brought in the viewership, and more shows in its style have been commissioned, and we'll continue to have this wonderful mishmash of Star Wars projects coming out on Disney Plus and beyond.
This can be a good learning experience for Lucasfilm, because I think they've had a lot of bad learning experiences very recently with some of the storytelling they've been doing. And I think with just going back to Last Jedi, going back to that whole debacle of like trying to do something different, and then it kind of going sideways and people reacting differently to it. And the disappointment that I felt, that was like, is Lucasfilm going to want to do stuff like this before? Like, I may not agree every single decision in Last Jedi, and not love that movie unconditionally, but I liked where it was going. I liked what it was doing. I hope that this show can lead the way into, okay, I would love it if Tony Gilroy wanted to do more stuff, but even so, more stuff in this style, more stuff that's not, do the Mandoverse stuff. Like, I'm not knocking any of that, like a lot of people on the internet doing. I love Mandoverse. Keep doing season 18 of Mandalorian. Like, keep doing that. I love that. But I also love this. I want them to keep doing stuff like this that's more on this line, and they can branch out. It doesn't have to be 5 years for A New Hope. It could be 1,000 years for The Phantom Menace. It could be The High Republic. It could be post T-Rose. It could be anything.
There's a comic book in the High Republic publishing line that's a sort of a spy detective, sort of a gritty detective story, and it just again, it just sort of goes to show you can do different genres within the Star Wars galaxy and have really interesting, really engaging results, and Andor is just another example of that. But what I wanted to say about sort of the way that this show is being paced is that it's kind of taking the best parts of, say, the Clone Wars and the best parts of Obi-Wan Kenobi, or a show that's sort of more traditional, because we're getting these 3-episode arcs. That's what we got the first week. This episode certainly feels like part 1 of 3, and the way Gilroy has talked about the directing blocks, it certainly seems like that's the way we're going. But they're like feeding one right into the other, because that was the thing that could sometimes get a little frustrating for me about the Clone Wars. As much as I love that show, is you'd get to the end of an arc and be like, oh my God, I want to see how that factors into the storyline going forward. And then it'd be something completely different. You'd be like, so different. And whereas, most shows, you go from one episode into the next, and
I don't understand why it's taken them, why it's taken them 14 years to figure this out. Like, and maybe it just goes back to, like, the movies understood that, like, the source material for all of this stuff, understands that. The books had that, like, going back to the beginning of not the EU necessarily, but the wide popularization and foundation of the EU. Tim Zahn's books very much had that good pacing to them, and you didn't. So I don't understand where it kind of fell off. Like,
I think there was an effort. Yeah, this is what George would do, and this is what he did with the Clone Wars, was that he adapted television to Star Wars as pacing, or more accurately, to his pacing.
Yeah.
He said, I don't want to do storylines that are contained to 22 minutes. I want to do them across 22 times 5 is 110? Yes. I want to do it across 110 minutes. So we're going to do these, and we're going to do stories that take place over 4 episodes. With subsequent Star Wars, the more recent stuff on television, for the most part, they've said, okay, we're going to do stories that are 22 minutes long. And so they've adapted Star Wars to fit the television mold, whereas Clone Wars adapted television to fit the Star Wars mold. And I feel like Andor is more closely following that. Now, granted, Andor is also more closely following the kind of Game of Thrones, HBO, Netflix drama pacing in general, which has less of an emphasis on we need to tell a contained story within an hour, and more an emphasis on we just need to advance the various storylines in the hour.
I have never seen the particular specific pacing of Andor ever. Exactly how it's paced. Like,
oh yeah,
it's paced like if in a sense, like if the Clone Wars was 40-minute episodes instead of 20-minute episodes, because it is clearly in arcs. But the thing is, the episodes are not even as self-contained as the Clone Wars episodes were. Like Clone Wars episodes at least had a certain level of self-containment because they understood that kids would be watching them on Saturday morning and they might just see one episode of an arc. So each episode was self-contained to an extent, even though they were part of a larger story. Like there was a mini story within each of the Umbara episodes, for example. Whereas there's really no mini story in the Andor episodes at all. And you can tell because you don't know when the episode's going to end. You have no idea when an Andor episode is going to end. At any point, you could be watching a scene, and that could be the last scene of the episode. There's no way to predict it.
During the actual last scene of the episode, I'm like, oh, I bet this is where it ends. I was like, I bet this is going to be it. That one
caught me off guard this time. This one caught me off guard, and it was only a musical cue that made me understand that a previous one, episode, I think 1 or 2, was ending, because I'm like, wow, music is swelling in a weird spot. It must be about to end, but from a story perspective, this is the middle of the story.
Yeah.
I've never seen that before. I've never seen it look quite like that.
And I think next week, again, be ready for it to end either with a cliffhanger or in some place that feels a little unsatisfactory, because it's not interested in being satisfactory week to week. It's paying off over 3 weeks.
Well, it makes me feel like we're watching an episode that is like 90 minutes to 2 hours long. And it's just, you're forced to stop watching it at a random point between scenes. Like, okay, it's like a 3 acts, but it doesn't even seem like acts. Maybe it's like acts to a film. That's probably the best way to put it. It's like it's actually a series of films that are cut into acts that are then each act is an episode. Like that's kind of what's going on here.
But I'm totally expecting next week to be a maybe shorter episode that's going to lead up to them going up to the dam. Yeah. And then it's going to cut off, and people are going to be screaming at their TVs,
Well, I think the way it'll go is next week we'll see them start to execute their plan. Things will go horribly wrong, and then it'll end. And we'll have to come back next week to find out how our heroes escape this tragic twist of fate.
We need a Deus Ex Mothma. That's what we need. Yeah, that makes sense. But yeah, it's fascinating how they're doing this. But I don't hate it. And here's the thing.
Oh yeah.
It worked really well when we got to watch the first 3 episodes together, because it wasn't very bothersome of where it ended, because you could just keep watching. And this is the only week where I'm like, okay, this is like, I really can't wait till next week, because you stopped in the middle of the story inside the story, all accounts.
And it just makes the decision to show those first 3 episodes all the more important.
It could not have been anything else.
Yeah, because it taught the audience what to expect from this show. Yeah. Yep. These are gonna be 3 episodes that together make one story. Like honestly, I cannot tell you where episode 1 ends and episode 2 begins, or episode 2 ends and where episode 3 begins. I cannot for the life of you tell you. It's all become blurred together in my mind. It's episodes 1 to 3 are just that. They're their own block. Because we're gonna have a week between episode 4 and 5. I'll probably remember. It's the campfire scene. That's where it is. But because they let us know with that first week, this is how the show's going to go. When it ended, without any real action, without a real escalation of the conflict in that final scene, that anything sort of the traditional, ending points to an episode, you realize, okay, this isn't part 4. This is part 1 of part 2, essentially. Exactly.
Yeah,
if that makes any sense.
It's unlike the episode following the Mortis arc, that part one of that part two, had nothing to do with the Mortis arc. Whereas now we're directly following the consequences of it, and that's what this show does that other Star Wars shows have missed sometimes.
Most Clone Wars episodes, especially the first episode of a lot of arcs, were like they would end and it would be like one episode. If you like watched it in like a vacuum, it'd be like, oh, this is just a good one-off episode. Hey, they left Mortis, yay! No, next episode, they're back into it. But this show doesn't care. Like it doesn't care. It just like whenever it's just like, I'll cut it there, and then you just pick up the next one. Things like that's what caught me so off guard with the second episode. Is like he's just walking, like Luthen's coming in, stuff's about to go down. Oh yeah, let's get on. It's like just cuts. Like what? Yeah. What is this? Like I would have been mad if I didn't have the episode right there. I could watch immediately.
Yeah. Exactly.
Well, the thing is, it's so common now. That's the last thing I'll say. It's so common to have the punch and the credits. Like in modern television now, it's like there's always some big revelation or some big thing that happens that takes the story for a little bit of a twist, and then boom, you got the credits. And like Marvel does this, Netflix does this, everybody, like HBO, Game of Thrones, House of Dragon, they tend to do that. Like the Rings of Power does that. Like everything does that. It's weird to not have that, but at the same time, like it actually might be a little bit better because then you don't have that rising and falling that happens that might separate the quality of certain episodes. Like I know some people have come out and said like, oh, I have to like this episode better than that episode. But for me, it's like, I can't differentiate it. How could I possibly even say I like one episode better than another one? It's like one long thing to me. That's just someone just arbitrarily snipped here and here.
Yeah. And again, I think now that we're going to get into the week to week stuff, it'll be easier to distinguish those things out. But for 1 to 3, it's like, well, that's an entity in and of itself.
Yeah.
All right, let's get into some of the specifics of the episode. Let's start on Coruscant because we're all Coruscant fans here.
We're Coruscanti.
We're Coruscanti. We've missed the capital city, although would rather. It wasn't under the control of, old Sheevy Palpatine, but, c'est la vie, that's how it goes. We begin kind of to see things from the Imperial perspective in this episode. The Empire was talked about in the previous 3. It was embodied by sort of the corporate security goons, but they weren't literally there. But here we are at the heart of the Empire. We're on Coruscant. We're at the ISB, the Imperial Security Bureau, and we're literally like attending a meeting. And, we don't get many board meetings in Star Wars. It's not something that typically happens. We had one very famously in the original film. And since then, it's something that's largely been shied away from. We've had some Senate meetings and that sort of things, but not a lot of board meetings. Chris, I'll toss this over to you because I suspect you'll have a lot to say about this. What did you think of getting to see the inner workings of the Empire in this way?
I can't believe it's 2022 and this is the first time we're seeing something like this. Like the idea of Imperial Center has been around for a very long time. So it's shocking that really the only thing I think that we have footage of is that one flashback scene in Rogue One. I think that's the only Imperial Center footage that we haven't in live and live action So I that's amazing. So this was fascinating. Oh gosh, there's so many aspects to this. So one of the things that is interesting about this is that they presented it in a way that would make sense to people who have never seen Star Wars before, which I like. This show, I believe, and it's very hard for me to do this because how do you forget Star Wars? But I do believe that this show seems pretty watchable for someone who's not really too far into the lore because of how character based it is, how domestic it is. People can relate to wearing socks, like, and shaving with a knife. The many domestic things in this episode. so I love how they presented Coruscant as the capital of the galaxy. They didn't call it Imperial Center or like something that wouldn't have really meant much.
BBY.
Yeah. Like if they right, exactly. It is really that same argument. I just disagree with that one because I think people just need to learn what that means. But this one I think makes sense. Because actually here's why. I'll say it right now. If you're watching Andor as your first Star Wars, seeing 5 years.
Oh my God! Can we just stick to this episode? I'm just.
No, I'm telling you why I like this and I don't like the other one. This is why, because it makes me sound inconsistent, and I had to think: am I being inconsistent?
No, I like capital of the galaxy. Everybody gets what that means.
But yeah, it does. It is good. It is good.
It could have said capital of the Galactic Empire or something like that.
But capital of the galaxy. It's very
straightforward.
Yeah. So that's cool. Okay, so that's the first thing at play. That's interesting. Okay, the second thing that is really fascinating about this is that they've completely changed Coruscant to depict a difference between Coruscant as the capital of the Republic and as the capital of the Empire. Like, there are a lot of tweaks that have been made to the look and feel of the city, which is really, really interesting. And so it happens on just a design level. You have more Gotham-like, Blade Runner-like, kind of brutalist Art Deco style, lots of concrete and lots of not as much color, not as many lights in this one, as opposed to a more old sci-fi kind of metropolis looking, kind of sleek, cosmopolitan look to the prequel Coruscant of the Republic, with a lot more bright lights and commerce and hustling and bustling. This is very different Coruscant. So that's very interesting. And then on top of that, they very much gave it the what's the word? Not serial show, not episodic show, procedural show. They gave it the really procedural show, like mainly it's drones over Toronto type shot at the beginning, where they're just hovering and looking straight down. It also is very reminiscent of Gotham shots in a lot of the newer Batman related movies.
It's like Chicago.
Yeah, it's got Midtown that Chicago cop type vibe to it, to the shots. And so like that was really, really fascinating. So just those little tiny tweaks to kind of change the mood and the tone up was very telling and visually interesting and fascinating to see. I think this is great. I think this is great. Not just, I would have been happy regardless if we just saw the same Coruscant from before. I would have thought it was amazing. But the fact that they actually took the time to think about, okay, this is going to be a little bit different now that this is Imperial Coruscant, and this is also a little bit different because this is a very noir type show. So we're going to make it have that 1940s vibe to it. Really, really interesting. Fascinating choices that I think are brilliant.
It's interesting how I understand people have, especially people that are older than me, have a lot of nostalgia for Tatooine and Hoth, plans from the original trilogy, stuff like that. I have so much nostalgia for Coruscant, not just from a prequel perspective, just from a Clone Wars fan perspective of like Coruscant is home base. Like you're like almost every Clone Wars episode starts with either starts with them leaving Coruscant to go off on a mission or ends with them, and landing on Coruscant. That planet has so much reverence, and it happens to be my favorite Star Wars planet, but also it is, we've never seen it in this era. And it's been so many years in real time. So we have seen it, that coming back to it is amazing. And the fact that it looks so different, that it has the same, shout out to the sound editors for bringing a lot of same sound effects back, those speeder sounds, stuff like that. It sounds a lot the same. It looks a lot the same, but also looks a lot different. We're seeing a different side of it. We're seeing it in a completely different era. Under, you can imagine the oppression that they're putting upon all the planets we've seen. From Tatooine to Jeddah to all these planets we're seeing under the Imperial regime, being under the iron boot of them. This is the center of it. This is where it's all coming from. Coruscant is probably the most, oppressed, the most policed planet in the entire galaxy. And we're seeing it just this stark. We don't see a lot of people. We don't see a lot of speeders. It's mostly just buildings, just top-down views. But it really is amazing. And also kind of it's not done egregiously. I think people, maybe rightfully so, have poked fun at good old Tony Gilroy for saying, "Oh, there's no fan service in here." So fan service. I think what Tony Gilroy is trying to get at is just like, it's not just, oh, we're going to throw this character in here for whatever reason. We're going to throw this planet in here for whatever reason. This all makes sense. And I think Coruscant showing up here makes perfect sense. It's not just going to check up on Mon Mothma because she's part of the rebellion. It's, we're going to a meeting where this stuff is happening and it's starting to show up on the Empire's radar in regards to what's going on out in the galaxy. And I love later how, you have Deidre, bringing this up and saying, "Hey, I'm seeing a pattern here." He's like, "Nah." And just, further driving home the audacity, the incompetence of the Empire, the sheer just ego that they have, that at this point they wouldn't even fathom the idea of a rebellion, the even think of anyone being in opposition to their power. And we're seeing that this episode overall shows us every level of this. We have the upper echelons of the rebellion, Mon Mothma, Lutheran Rail, people that are funding this stuff, that are organizing. You have the upper echelons of the Empire. They're both kind of onto each other, but they're not really onto each other. And then you have all the way down to just the lowest level of people on Aldhani who are trying to get this thing together and, doing literally living hand to mouth in the woods, trying to start a rebellion. That's why I think this is this amazing episode overall, that it really is kind of like the beginnings of the rebellion is here. It's finally, it's all here, but it all, comes back to Coruscant.
Yeah. And we're also in a way kind of starting to see the beginnings of the downfall of the Empire. In these scenes with the ISB, we can start to see that complacency, that sort of, we're just doing stuff for the sake of doing it vibe that's going on, that the rebellion will be able to exploit. Cassian has the line in the previous episode that was in all the trailers, they're so fat and happy they would never imagine that somebody like me could get inside their house. And that's sort of where the Empire gets to with a lot of these guys. They just think, yeah, we're good. We're set. Nobody could ever take us down. So they get complacent, and Mon Mothma, Lutheran Rael, Cassian Andor, and eventually Luke Skywalker, Princess Leia, and Han Solo really show that
you could make the argument, looking at the macro view of the Star Wars saga, but also especially this episode, that like the Empire is almost as much to blame for their own downfall as the rebellion is. Because if this old dude sitting up in the head of the ISB, like if he had said, "Hey, why don't Deirdre, you should go check that out. You should go wipe out this rebel cell," maybe the rebellion never formed. Maybe if they actually take this seriously, Cassian isn't there for Rogue One. He doesn't end up sending off the Death Star plans and dying in the process, and everything else that happens. It's the fact that they realize way too late that the rebellion is a formidable opponent.
Yeah, even in A New Hope, they're kind of downplaying.
There is some of them that are like, Mahdi is like, he's like, dangerous to your Starfleet commander, but not this battle station. Like, he's all in. He doesn't take him seriously. But then the other ones are like, like, this rebel thing is getting out of hand, guys. They just kicked our butts at Scarif. Come on.
Yeah. Yeah. So we're introduced to a couple of new Imperial characters in this episode. We got Anton Lesser as Partagaz. He's sort of the main guy at the ISB there. Game of Thrones fans will know him as Qyburn. So I think instead of calling him Partagaz, we should just call him Grand Moff Qyburn because that would be easier.
Yeah. Grand Moff Qyburn.
Grand Moff Qyburn. It's got a nice ring to it, I think. We got Denise Go as Deirdre Miro. She seems to, again, from the cast listings and, all that stuff, seems to like she'll be a major player. She's gotten a poster and all that stuff.
She's doing a lot of press for this stuff too, yeah.
And then one that was very exciting to me, but will be completely baffling to most people. Ben Bailey Smith is Blevin. Ben Bailey Smith is a British comedian who also goes by the name Doc Brown, who was on season 2 of Taskmaster. So I was very excited and very confused when I saw him show up at the premiere event a couple weeks ago. I was like, what is Doc Brown doing? It's Doc Brown and Andor, and it took me forever to try and find confirmation. And then there he is as an Imperial officer. That's what happens when you can't spot bridges. You become an Imperial officer. There are like 10 people that got that references, and they are killing themselves laughing. Okay, but just great casting all around, but those three seem to be positioned kind of, they represent the Imperial sort of way of being, that they're on the same side, but they're kind of against each other. Deidre's asking Blevin constantly. She wants a look at these files, and he's very territorial about them. He doesn't want to give them over. And you can kind of you start to see the tensions and the politics just within the Empire. And this is adding another, like you were saying, Ben, this is adding another layer to the show. For the first 3 episodes, it was all about Cassian and his sort of personal journey, and it was to a lesser extent about Karn and his personal journey. Now we're adding in the galactic scale. We're adding in the context for these conflicts that we're going to see play out on a real personal level. Ben, I'll throw this one back to you. What do you think of how we're seeing these 3 in particular, but just the Empire in general interact with each other, and where do you think we might be headed with this sort of thing?
Yeah, it is interesting because I'm thinking that they're acting kind of like Sith in a way. That they're backstabbers. They hate each other. They just want to get over on one another. But then you pull back and like these people are soldiers for the Sith. They are working for a Sith Lord. And it would only be natural that they are behaving like their master. And, it is fascinating to see the inner workings of this. And we've only seen hints at the ISBs thus far. We've had great characters like Callus and Krennic and all these guys that have really shown themselves to be things, but also shown themselves, in Callus's case, turned around and joined the rebellion. That whole thing. I'm very curious to see how these characters kind of play out in regards to, Deidre is right. Deidre is right on the money. She's the only person in the room that's got a pulse on what's going on. She's watching this stuff. She's the smartest person in the room, but no one is listening to her. And we know they probably don't listen to her because things don't go so well for these guys. But it is fascinating to see. Again, the confidence, all this kind of stuff, and how far will this get her? Will she ultimately, get her way in some form, or where does this go? How does this play out?
Yeah, I think the safe bet is that her and Cyril Karn will eventually wind up teaming up. They will find each other through all of this Imperial bureaucracy and wind up being kind of the main 2 antagonists for the series. I think is again just a guess, just kind of based on who's been at Celebration and that sort of thing.
The thing is though, are they really antagonists? That's the thing that's interesting about
they're
this.
Imperials.
They're Imperials, but from a writing point of view, they're not being presented that way. There's a big difference between this and Rogue One. Rogue One starts off with Krennic and his men shooting Jin's mom. And then you see Tarkin come in and just railroad Krennic. And then you see Vader come in and choke Krennic. And like it's just an evil fest on the antagonist side in Rogue One. And you have heroes, you have some kind of gray-ish characters. Cassian himself is a gray-ish character throughout most of the movie. You don't know what he's really gonna do. And that's definitely the case with Saw Gerrera. It's very morally ambiguous. But in this show, it's not like the other Disney Plus shows or the films where it's very clear, okay, these people are evil and these people are fighting the evil people. Like, the system is being presented as the evil in this show, not the characters. And that continues to be the case at every level. We had that conversation last week about how, is Karn really a villainous, evil character or not? Because he's just trying to solve a murder. He's just trying to bring about justice. And then you see him absolutely shell-shocked when he realized the, no pun intended, carnage that results from it. So, like, you know, and now with Deidre, it's the same thing where it's like somebody stole something and she's going after it. She sees a rebellion. Now, of course, there can be questions about, is she on the right side? And we know she's on the wrong side of history. We know that the ultimate system that she serves is an evil system. But you got to think that personally, we have no reason to believe that she is a unethical person in her day-to-day lives with what she sees in front of her. And perhaps the Empire there's little subtle things here that they're explaining why people buy into the Empire at a lot more nuance than they have in Star Wars before. Like, for example, the Empire is usually shown as people that come in and do genocide. Like, that's kind of typically how the Empire is presented in Star Wars, as genocidal maniacs that just firebomb planets. Like, happens again and again and again and again. Not in this show.
Like Tarkin is like this close to a mustache twirling villain. Like, he's a guy that has a big gun, and he's like, I'm gonna blow up planets. I'm just to prove a point, just to you know, do this. I'm gonna blow up your planet. I'm gonna kill billions of people just to make a point. And then you have the antagonists of this show are basically just people doing their jobs. Like, basically, Deidre just like, she's at a board meeting and she's working, and then she finds out something, and she's ambitious, as people often are in careers, and she's trying to get above this other guy, so she tries to weasel something in, and it doesn't work, and goes about day. She doesn't do anything evil. She's working for an evil organization, but, you know, as we've talked about in the past, you know, the Empire is made up of potentially billions of people who are just doing their jobs, who are perhaps turning a blind eye or may not even know the evils of the Empire. Heck, Frick on that other planet, he liked the Empire. He was just a lowly little tram driver. He was a big fan of the Empire,
and
though.
We'll talk about it. We will talk about it, you know, in a bit when we move on from the Coruscant stuff. But, like, you know, there's a line said in this movie about Mimban. And how, you know, Cassian really realized, oh, they're just, the people there are just fighting each other. The Empire is just pitted each other against themselves. And they're not real. They actually are on the same side. And it was the system that put them, no, you're over here, you're over here. And I have a feeling that if that's the attitude talking about that particular battle, then I'm wondering if that's the attitude that's going to pervade this entire show, because I think it's very possible, like what I just said before, is like a real solid rule here, which is the antagonist of this show, the villain of the show, is the system, is the Empire itself as a bureaucratic system. It's not the people. I'm not so sure that individuals are going to be painted as villainous. I think they will be painted as cowardly and incompetent, and some of them might make selfish choices as people do, but I don't think anyone's going to be that cardboard cutout villain like we're so used to seeing in Star Wars and most of media.
Yeah, I think probably where we're headed is we'll follow through this season. We'll follow Cassian on his story. We'll follow Deidre and Cyril on their story, and they'll kind of run parallel. And at a certain point, they're going to crash into each other.
Yeah.
That's not what parallel means, but you know what I mean. They're gonna hit.
The one thing that parallel lines
That's not parallel. They don't do, but they're on opposite tracks, is what I meant to say. Not parallel, opposite. They will
excruciatingly acute angle.
I've
does not intersect for a very long time.
I've been sick all week. You guys are lucky I'm even here.
But
the point I want to make. The point I want to make is they're on opposite tracks. We're gonna follow them for a long way, and eventually they're gonna crash into each other. And the question will be, who wins out when that happens? Whose ideology wins out? Is it the ideology of the system that Cyril and Deidre have found themselves trapped in? Are they just going to go, okay, we're part of this, so we're going with it? That's just who we are. We are Imperials. That's what we do. Or is Cassian or someone else representing the rebellion going to be able to take these potentially and seemingly well-intentioned people and make them realize all the things that you're saying, Chris, all the things that you're saying, that the system is the real evil here. And if that to me feels like a more satisfying conclusion to the series, Cassian recruiting people to his cause more so than, blowing up the 0.5 Death Star or whatever.
Or they will die tragically misguided. Just like in the Umbara episodes of the Clone Wars, where clones ended up killing each other, and it's not at the fault of either side. The machinations pitted them against each other unwittingly. I feel like we might have a situation where we see good ethical characters on the Imperial side die just because they're on the Imperial side, and the rebels have to go through them inevitably.
Yeah, like you could, sort of the cliche way of doing it would be to have people have the two of them start to question things, start to wonder if they're on the right side, and then they'll come face to face with Cassian and wind up in a shootout, and we know who lives. We know who makes it to Rogue One.
Yep.
The other guys, their fates are a little bit more in question.
I mean, what's amazing about this show is they've already set up this juxtaposition between these very polished Imperial characters that we don't even know if they have the guts to kill anyone. And then we have the protagonist of the show already a murderous human being.
Yeah. We're talking about the possibility of them becoming turncoats or all that sort of thing. Another possibility is we see them become more hardline. We see the impact of choices that Cassian has to make that radicalize people the other way. Again, Cyril Karn's a guy who seems, he's bought into the whole idea of the corporate security thing, but he was investigating a murder, and he felt people that work for him were murdered, and so it should be investigated, or work for the same company as him, it should be investigated. And then he gets embarrassed by Cassian. What if he, this mission that Cassian's on now is to steal Imperial payroll? Well, what if that messes up something to do with Deidre's life? And then all of a sudden, these people that, were working for the Empire, but underneath it all had good intentions, solving murders, investigating stolen stuff, all of a sudden started to go, these rebels, man, they just keep making my life more and more difficult. And you know what? This was just a job, but Palpatine was right about a few things.
But
and
now
you know
I'm not
what?
getting paid.
Yeah. You know what? Palpatine's right. I can't let the rebels stand just on principle now. Now, before it was just a job. Now it's personal. So, we may see them become, they may not be true villains, quote unquote, now, but we might see them become those true villains because of things that happen around them that inform their worldview and make them angry.
I feel like that is such a more accurate and nuanced take on how villains are formed. It's like, yeah, some people, are evil babies. I'm sure evil babies exist.
Yeah.
But that's not real life. Like real life, when people turn out to do horrendous things, typically there's a complex process that led them to that point. And it doesn't mean what they did is right. It just means that, it's not as black and white as someone waking up one day and saying, I'm going to murder a bunch of people. Like, that's very rare.
And I always go back to Lost Stars. I love that book because you have the character of Thane Tyrell, who's like, nah, I can't do this Empire thing anymore. They're doing too many bad stuff. You have other characters, like one character in particular, he's from Alderaan. He's on the Death Star when they blow up Alderaan. And at the end of the book, he's like full on with Empire. Like he like keeps deluding himself into, it doesn't matter how bad the Empire is, the rebels are worse, so therefore they have to do this. They were terrorists, all this kind of stuff. People will delude themselves into believing basically whatever's convenient for them if it makes themselves feel better or, enforces their worldview.
They have to be on the right side. What they're doing has to be right, because if it's not, they then have to confront what they've been doing and realize that it wasn't right. And that it was very, very wrong.
But like, does Cyril Karn, like, what's his worldview? How does he take away from this? We see him very sad, go back to his mom's place and get slapped, at the end of this episode. Sad guy, but like, what does he take away from that? Does he take away from, I was an idiot and I did the wrong thing, or I was right the whole time, there was a bunch of idiots and I'm going to keep trudging forwards on this destructive path?
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, it's gonna be fascinating. That whole sequence where he goes home, like, Kyle Solar, what an actor that guy is, man. He's been a revelation. Like he was this sort of like, it was fun to see him like all uptight, like serious man over the first couple of episodes, and to now see him like having to like, be taken down a peg. He's done such a good job of making a character that, again, could have been kind of cartoony, silly, villainy kind of guy, and given him a lot of humanity, where, even though may not agree with what he's doing, again, because of the system that he's a part of, you can still sympathize with him, still empathize with him a whole heck of a lot. And yeah, I do think Gold Deidre's going to get her hands on that report and realize, I want to ask this guy some questions. Where does his mother live? I'm gonna go pay her a visit. And he's there too. Oh, look at that.
It's convenient.
Look at that. Let's talk about the other stuff that's going on Coruscant. Let's talk about Mon Mothma. Her introduction to this series, arriving at Luthen's gallery. I had just from the trailers assumed Luthen was a senator. But this is much more interesting. He's a I describe him as Doc Ondar's best competition. For those of you that have been to Galaxy's Edge, but he's a collector of fine historical artifacts, and it is a lot of fun to look around his shop. We'll put a couple of screenshots up on the screen, but there's some Mandalorian armor. There's a Kalikori back there, something that looks very Starkiller, Dark Starkiller meets a samurai.
That's straight up Starkiller's helmet, by the way.
Yeah, on a samurai costume.
Right, and I love the people going like, "Oh, Starkiller's canon now." I'm like, okay, you do realize that helmet is from a non-canon ending to a now non-canon Star Wars game, okay? I don't think you quite grasp this.
Yeah, and then there's just some other random stuff in there that's fun to wonder what it could be. But the real kicker in terms of hidden Easter eggs are a couple of tablets there in the background that bear the hand symbols of the Mortis gods that we saw, similar to what we saw on the Lothal Jedi Temple, which of course was the entry point to the world between worlds, a location we expect to see in Ahsoka. So lots of fun to be had in Luthen's gallery there. But Chris, I'll throw it to you. What do you think of Mon Mothma's introduction and the way that they brought her into this series?
Well, are we talking about Luthen too?
Yeah.
Okay. Because chronologically, I want to talk about that first.
All right. Well, let's start with Luthen then, and we'll circle back to Mon Mothma.
Yeah, Mon Mothma then arrives later. So with Luthen, I thought it was really interesting showing him kind of almost playing this character of this kind of like elite, high society Coruscanti dude. Like, I thought that was really interesting, and it's like, you know, amazing acting by Stellan there. Like, you know, like it just completely different personality. You know, right there. I mean, gosh, the difference between him being like, "Hey, Mon Mothma, welcome to the shop. We're gonna make you relax now," and him shouting later in the episode, "Look at me!" Like completely different characters. Like, so I thought that was really, really, really fascinating. So then moving on to Mon Mothma, I really don't have a lot to say about her right now because she hasn't really been presented with a major dilemma yet. We are just starting to get to know. This was very expositional few scenes about her that were just kind of showing the audience kind of who she is and what she's doing right now. So of course Genevieve O'Reilly is great. And you know, the character is very interesting and exciting, but I want to see a lot more from her before I really have complex things to say about her characterization. Anything that I would say at this point would be speculation about how they're going to potentially use her in the show still.
That's fair. That's fair. Ben, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, that scene is incredible. Like, the acting is just phenomenal. And backing it just a little bit more, I mean, I love his whole suit up sequence. I love him. Just the subtle moments of him.
That's the other thing I wanted to say. Face cloths are now canon.
There you go. Like a hot towel, sir.
That's amazing.
But like his whole thing where he's standing there, he's kind of doing his thing and he's kind of getting into character and he's smiling and all this kind of stuff. You've seen this guy just like be all grumpy and Andor, all this kind of stuff. Fight these bastards. And he's turning into this other guy. Like I'm telling you, the Batman Bruce Wayne.
Yeah.
Like the callbacks there, the parallels are pretty substantial here.
Right down to the idea that, you know, Bruce Wayne is the real mask and Batman is who he really is. Right. Luthen on the battlefield is who he really is. Yeah. Luthen on Coruscant, his real quote unquote identity, that's his cover.
Yeah, right. I love like he's so like he separates, like there's a fake wall in his ship. Like in his actual ship is like a fake wall. You'd think that would be a private area, but like he's up, you know, hiding it to that extent. And you know, even with like the driver's like the only one there that's in on it, but they're like they can't be super conspicuous. They go back in the back room, and you know, and that whole thing. And I'm also wondering like who's she talking about bringing in? Who's she? You know, is she talking about Bail? Is she talking about? You know,
no fan service.
I like the Bail Organa thing crossed my mind as well, but I gotta think Bail's already involved in all this. I gotta think
100%. Because think about how old Leia is at this point.
Yeah,
compared to, this is much after Kenobi.
Yeah, so
it would be interesting if they, you know, how much they figure it. I'm assuming since. The reason we have Genevieve O'Reilly in this role in the first place is the Revenge of the Sith deleted scenes. I would assume they are canon. They are considered canon.
Yeah.
And, you know, being that is supposed to be the beginning of the rebellion of them sitting around a table going like, well, we're the coalition of 2000 and we're not going to let the Empire do all this kind of stuff. That the fact that things, but I also could see the idea where, you know, Bail's kind of doing his own thing. He's working with Ahsoka. He's working with the Ghost, and he's doing his own little rebellion, and we've all been told that there's different sides of this rebellion, and Luthen's doing his own thing, and Mon Mothma's kind of hooked up with him, and she's like, well, can I get you two together, basically?
I get the impression Luthen's trying to coordinate all the different factions.
Yeah.
Like he's kind of trying to be the go-between guy. He's trying to provide the money, which is what he's given Mon Mothma a hard time about in this episode. And that he's trying to be, because like everybody, like the crew on Aldhani, they all seem to know about various different factions, right? Because when Sleepy McSleepface, I don't know what his real name is, when that dude gets woken up by the other guy with the gun in his face, he lists off a bunch of other rebel cells and says, like, if you've been with any of these guys, including Saw Gerrera, you wouldn't survive this little slip up.
Cassian listed off 4 different things too when trying to figure out who Luthen was with.
And Luthen says, Cassian says, aren't they all the same? And Luthen says something to the effect of, yeah, all right, that's what I think too. Or, like Luthen wants to create the rebel alliance. He wants to create the alliance of rebels.
Yeah.
And that's what he's out for right now. And I have to think Bail Organa is probably already part of this. It'd be real nice to see Bail pop up in this show, continue the Jimmy Smits resurgence in Star Wars. But I have a feeling whoever this is going to be the traitor. I have a feeling that this is not going to go well for Mon Mothma. I think this is going to be part of the reason she decides, you know what, I just got to embrace who I really am and go on the run. I don't want it to be the case. I like Mon Mothma. I don't want to see her fail. But this is a spy story, and I am expecting somebody at some point in this.
Russ Clovis. No way, is he dead? I think he's dead.
I think he's done.
But no, Lot died.
Oh God.
He's a
you know what?
Right? He hates the Empire, right? His Darth Vader murdered his friends.
I think, being that this is a spy thriller, I think the whole idea of bringing in someone, establishing someone, and then ripping off the mask and realizing, oh my goodness, they were a traitor all along. That's going to be interesting to see. Because I'm already thinking, like, who could be a traitor now? Could Luthen be a bad guy? Like, we don't know anything about him. Like, he could be organizing all these rebels just so the Empire could take him out. Who knows?
I mean, the guy lives a double life almost as well as Mr. Sheev does. And also, he's a big fan of lying to people. So, I don't know.
Like, you could read, like, that conversation that he has. He has a conversation with Cassian in the ship. Then he goes out and talks to Vel. And, like, those two different conversations are so contrasted in the fact that, he's trying to explain to him how this is all going and how he's working this. And then, how much value he puts in Cassian, how much he cares about him. Like, I didn't risk my ass for that stupid box. It came for you. And then he's telling her, like, well, he's disposable. That's why we're renting him. Like, whatever. Like, what is the truth? What is the truth, Luthen, here? In regards to what's he actually feel? Who is he actually playing here?
I think Luthen tells people what they need to hear. To get to accomplish what he needs them to accomplish, he tells them what they need to hear.
Also, I like the theory that Vel is his daughter.
Ooh, interesting. I hadn't heard that one.
I don't know. I mean, it's very Star Warsy. It's very Star Wars.
It is.
I mean, it reminds me of the theory that we've already seen Cassian's sister last week. So that was going around a little bit.
Oh boy,
a few candidates for that one.
Man,
one of them might have been a little Game of Thrones-esque.
Well, this TV season, what could be hotter?
Here's the thing. He does have his hands in a lot of money right now. I mean, he's having Mon Mothma hand him money. He's about to steal probably millions worth of credits from the Empire. Like,
yeah. He's like, I think he's the good guy equivalent of what we're seeing on the Imperial side. Yes. He's willing to make ethical and moral sacrifices for what he views as a good cause. And, you know, we as the audience know that, yeah, the rebellion's pretty good cause, better than the Empire. Yeah, sure. But yeah, he's lying to everybody. His whole existence is a lie.
Yeah.
You know, he's as I said, he's living a double life. He's pressuring people. He's telling me what you need to hear, what you want to hear, to an extent. You know, he may have altruistic intentions, but he's got some sketchy ways of going about it.
At the very least, he is someone who is trying to do a ultimately good thing, but is cares nothing about the means justifying the means. Like, he is willing to do anything to make this rebellion happen. Like a guy that's just like has someone get like, kill him, I'll kill him. Like, he's ruthless. Like, he has that thing in him, that like he'll do anything. Like, he has no remorse.
Yeah. What's the deal with Mon Mothma's husband?
Okay, so
what is with this guy?
So
you're funding your wife is funding the Rebel Alliance, and you set up this dinner party. It's like, hey, honey, guess what? I've invited Kim Jong-un for dinner. And also there are going to be Nigel Farage, Jared Kushner, and Donald Rumsfeld. Like, what are we doing here? Like, come on.
Well, okay. So here's the thing: is like, first of all, there's no way he knows. There's no way he knows.
No,
what
he's.
There's no way he would not
the
be
sharing
doing,
type.
He seems to be your oblivious, high society, Coruscant socialite type person who probably inherited his office that he has from his regimentarians or whatever they were called. Like, you know, and I think, you know, he's the example of lavishness. You know, I think I'm not as big a historian as some people are, but like, from what I know about the Roman Empire, it died with a decadent elite and an extremely impoverished peasantry, and I think, and a lot of slaves as well. I think that's about how it went out. And they're presenting the empire, and this is obviously something that has been done many times, where the empire is equated to the Roman Empire. But they're presenting it very similarly to that historical view of the Roman Empire, where you have these very out of touch, decadent, you know, capital elite people like Mon Mothma's partner, and then you have the people that are just trying to survive on the street, like Cassian and Andor, and they're the exact opposite of each other. And between that is this entire system that has created this hierarchy that is based on oppression. And you have, you know, discussion and scenes at the ISB about their number one priority is to be doctors to fix diseases in their slavery system. Like, they're being told, oh, it's really good that you're incarcerating so many people that are being sent to prison camps right now. Mm-hmm. That's your number one objective, and that's awesome. We're going to promote you based on that. And it's your job to, if there's a problem with that, you got to go in like a surgeon and remove that problem. And that's their job at the Security Bureau. So, like, I feel like he's playing that role there of just kind of an example of what is wrong with the imperial system, that when you have that level of oppression, you end up with a class of people that, like, would not survive in the real world, because their life is inviting people to dinner and deciding, let's seat the interesting ones at this end and the boring ones at that end. And that's their life.
Yeah.
Right.
But what? But then, so
why does she? Why?
Yeah.
Does she? Yes,
why?
Yes.
That's the question.
She is also, to an extent, having to play a game. Like, mm-hmm. You're not in politics if you're not playing a game. Padme is extremely rare. She's like a one-of-a-kind type person who, like, really isn't seen playing politics, you know, in Star Wars. And perhaps that was the fault of George Lucas for not fleshing her out enough. I feel like, in general, her character was not fleshed out enough in the prequels. I wanted to see more from her. But, like, I feel like, you know, in order to be inside this imperial system, and even in the republic system that existed prior to this, you had to have some level of playing the game. And I feel like Mon Mothma definitely is playing the game, engaging herself in all this high society BS stuff, to the extent where she seems to have married someone for like the person's office, essentially. Like, they don't seem like they're in love with each other. That doesn't seem to be going on.
Maybe once upon a time.
He does say, I put this on your calendar. Like, they didn't even talk about it.
Yeah, like there's I have the feeling that, you know, she
cleared it with your secretary. Like,
yeah, this was very much like, I'm going to marry someone in my class, but everybody in this class sucks type situation. And, you know, but yeah, I get real like House of Cards vibes from that whole, like the whole politics of that side of things. Like, it's really interesting.
You won't get this reference, but for everybody who's watching House of the Dragon, it's a real a Rhaenyra Targaryen and Laenor Valyrian situation going on here. Only one of them may well be actively undermining the other in this case. Yeah, fascinating stuff. It's going to be real interesting to see how that plays out. You know, Mon Mothma's, Luthen is worried that, you know, she's surrounded by spies, including, you know, the driver. Maybe the husband turns out to be the traitor, or maybe the husband figures it out.
This is pretty far into, you know, her history as a senator, because, you know, she's a senator, you know, was a senator 13 years prior to this, at the very least, if not longer. And she was probably very young, just like Padme, when becoming a senator. She clearly doesn't have any children. That hasn't shown up yet. Maybe it will, but so far it hasn't. So this could be a recent thing where she could have married this guy sometime in the past decade. And that very much suggests that, well, okay, if she knows after the Empire happens that that all the people around her aren't to be trusted, why not marry the stupidest person in Coruscant? Because at least you can trust him for not being conniving and backstabbing and being just, you know, in general incompetent to the level of not realizing who your wife's greatest political enemies are.
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah, all he'll do is accidentally invite Sly Moore over for dinner.
Yeah, we don't get to see Sly Moore, by the way.
I know, right? Like, that's the cameo I'm waiting for next week.
The party's coming up. The party's coming
Come
up.
on, Tony.
That's what see it tomorrow in Umbarans and have a Clone Wars addition to Sly Moore's the backstory. That would be fascinating.
But I appreciate, like, this kind of stuff happens in real life. Like, people go apart, and, you know, real world politics and stuff like that can come between people, and especially when you're a senator. Like, I would assume they got married probably years and years before this, maybe before the Clone Wars, maybe long before the Clone Wars.
Maybe he was an artist and his name was Pablo.
God.
maybe. You know, who knows?
Every senator's first kiss is with Paulo. Every single one of them.
Yes.
But, you know, it is like back then, things were simpler. Things were just like, oh yeah, we're all working for the Republic, whatever. And, you know, just like with just the military and all this kind of stuff, the Republic turning into the Empire, there are people that are like, yeah, the Republic just got an upgrade, yay! And then there's other people that are like, no, like, the Empire is just all the bad parts of the Republic on the surface now and just magnified. And it's funny to see that play out within the context of a marriage between two married people who are clearly have just grown so far apart that they just tolerate each other, probably just for political points and just to keep up a face. And Mon Mothma, in her own way, just like Luthen, is playing a part. She is obviously speaking out and being a thorn in the inside of the Empire, but she's still playing along. And she's a part of this whole thing and working, again, someone doing her job, just like Deidre, just in a different way. Deidre's kind of bought into this, whereas Mon Mothma is secretly not, but also not so secretly.
God, I'm so excited by the prospect of this dinner party. I'm so.
Wait, there's a
I've
scene,
never been.
The guy that looks like Valorum. That's not Valorum. That's a dinner party. Come on.
I've never been so excited for a dinner party that I'm not invited to.
We keep getting cheated out of good dinner parties. First, they cut all of the Nabari family stuff from the prequels, which was the best dinner party scenes ever. And they didn't show us what happened when Darth Vader had dinner with his daughter and her boyfriend either.
That Robot Chicken sketch is still iconic. Who has 2 thumbs and betrayed his best friend? This guy. Oh goodness. Yeah, I don't know. If the dinner party is taking place next week, I feel like when we all stay up to watch the episode, we need to have one fancy piece of food prepared with us to eat during the episode.
I wouldn't put it past them to hold off on the dinner party until 2 weeks from now, and have it intercut with the Aldhani heist.
Well,
I think we're gonna see like a big intense scene of Sly Moore and Mon Mothma having at it. Maybe they have they exchange some verbal barbs. Maybe they go full, maybe Mon Mothma punches her. I don't know. They could get to that point.
Or they could do like a Godfather thing and do like a juxtaposition and be like, here are people getting mowed down, over on Aldhani, and then here are people cutting into their Nuna on Coruscant.
Well, and there's also she mentioned the Vizier or something, which I think is Grand Vizier is the Masameta's title.
Masameta.
So what if Masameta is there?
I wouldn't be surprised, and again, just guessing here, but I wouldn't be surprised if there were a surprise guest at the dinner party, someone who wasn't invited, someone who wasn't on Mon Mothma's husband's little seating plan there. Perhaps the Grand Vizier, or perhaps someone even higher up. Unlikely. It's not like I'm not expecting Palpatine or Tarkin or something like that. But
wait a minute. Wait a minute. Okay. My brain is about to go boop because here's the thing. I can imagine Palpatine in his flowing red and blue robe showing up to a dinner party, but all wrinkly Sheev, Darth Sidious showing up with his cowl, just
that
sitting at a table eating.
Okay.
I don't know.
Think about
he's
this.
Slurping. He's slurping spaghetti. He's like, wow, this is so tasty.
Know about that.
But think about this.
Would someone pass the meatballs, please?
Does he even eat?
Think about this though. The door opens.
We know some other things that the guy does based on new canon, but does he eat?
They open the door and Palpatine's there, but it's not wrinkly Palpatine. It's nice, non-wrinkled, good-looking Palpatine. And you can't figure out why. And then he wanders around and he does all this thing and he leaves the party and you realize he was a realistic Snoke hologram the whole time.
I mean,
came out of a jar.
They did the in Rebels. They did the thing where Ezra meets Palpatine, and when he meets him via hologram, he meets the kindly, Chancellor Senator Palpatine. Now, there's hologram trickery there, but maybe, I don't know, maybe Palpatine has some way of briefly rejuvenating himself to be, Ian McDermott's Sans makeup or Sans prosthetics, I should say, for the duration of a dinner party.
So
I mean, there is the theory that was makeup the whole time. Ian McDermott is just the facade and the wrinkly.
Yeah. Well, there's another one along with the Luthen thing where the Palpatine's real face is Darth Sidious and his cover is his false identity is Sheev Palpatine.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that's a thing. I think that something in canon like confirmed that at some point over the past few years. Where is
I mean, that's
where's
one
Matthew?
of the. I feel like that's one of those more metaphorical.
Where
metaphorical
are
things.
Ion Canon?
I don't know. This is what Joel has for us in the chat. Ian McDermott says Palpatine eats Ewoks. So I don't know what Mon Mothma is serving, but maybe I don't want to attend this dinner
Here's
party.
the thing: is the Chandrillans, they serve the Star Wars version of Snickers bars, and what happens is every week, Palpatine has to show up so he can look like his old self again, because he looks like a wrinkly old man, so he needs to eat a Snickers because everybody turns into Darth Sidious when you're hungry.
When you're hungry, yeah, of course, of course. Anyway, let's move off of Coruscant for the time being, and let's talk about let's actually talk about Andor in this Andor discussion. We pick up with Cassian and Lutheran right back where we left them at the end of the previous episodes on the ship, and Lutheran's still kind of having to convince Cassian to join the fight or to join up properly, and they bring up Min-Man, and Chris, you mentioned this earlier, so I'll throw it back over to you. What did you make of the way Lutheran went about recruiting Cassian, and what Cassian had to say for himself about his experiences so far?
I mean, first of all, Cassian is just on a ride right now that he wants off of. Very, very clearly, to the point, where there was that great little subtle scene where when Luthans talking to Vel, Cassian sees the controls of the ship, and he takes one step towards them, and then the ship computer bot droid is like, "Yo, can I help you?" Really funny. So that little things like that, show you where Cassian is, and then it backwards informs that initial set of scenes there, and it's really Lutheran's doing everything he can to just continue luring Cassian by offering him, you can have vengeance, you can have credits, you can have all these things, and he's trying to figure out, because he doesn't really know what motivates Cassian. And he also kind of says that he kind of says I know everything about you kind of on the outside, but on the inside, he doesn't know. He's still trying to kind of figure him out. And that's very clear because, it's what he says is just barely working. And it's really out of desperation and really no other way out that Cassian continues to follow through this trail that has kind of been laid out for him by Luthen, which, continues that arc that we continue to have of Luthen being a manipulative character, notwithstanding the side being the right one that he apparently is fighting for. So that's really interesting. So it's this is still a very formative time, obviously, in Cassian's character. And again, it makes sense because his character is not fully formed even in Rogue One. The movie Rogue One is the formation of the ultimate state of who Cassian Andor is. So we're going to continue to see throughout this show, Cassian's not really going to fully ever come into his own as a hero, or otherwise you're going to end up with a Ezra Bridger situation where progress is made and then it doubles back and then it has to be made again. I don't expect them to make that same kind of error and character development here that they did on that show. So he's kind of along for the ride, and it just kind of goes for this show not making clear antagonists and protagonists. I mean, you have in Rogue One, Jyn Erso's clearly a protagonist who's always making the right decision. Rey is always making the right decision. Han Solo's always making the right decision. Cassian's not that character. He's not the character who's always going to be making the right decision. He's not. He's going to be screwing up, and we're going to see him screw up. So, I think it's really interesting that kind of we're seeing him presented in this nuanced way where, this is supposed to be the hero's call and the hero's journey arc. This is supposed to be there's that moment where, Luke Skywalker realizes that he has lost everything and he decides, yes, I'm going to do this. I'm going to take on the Empire, and he's not dragging his feet and looking for a way out through all of A New Hope. Cassian is here. So it's just a different type of
Yeah.
arc and story. That's kind of the main thing I'm getting out of this.
Yeah. I mean, the one of the sort of the quintessential steps in the hero's journey is the refusal of the call, right?
Yes.
And that happens in most stories. There's always a moment where the hero sort of hesitates. And one thing that people tend to misunderstand about the hero's journey is that the steps don't always happen in the same order for every story, and they don't always play the same role in every story. And this might well be a story where the refusal of the call is not something that just happens once. It happens over and over again, or it's attempted to happen, and it sort of plays out through the story. Whereas, Luke refuses the call when Obi-Wan says, "You must learn the ways of the Force if you come with me to Alderaan." And Luke, "I can't go to Alderaan. I got chores to do." And then Aunt and Uncle die, and is like, "All right, I'm going." And like you said, he's not thinking about getting out of that journey ever since then. Yeah. Cassian sort of accepts the call when he leaves with Luthen. But then you're right. He's trying to refuse it again. He's trying to get out of it. And I think that push and pull is going to be a big part of this journey. And that step in the hero's journey is going to be one that we investigate in great detail in this story. And just to further your point about Cassian being a guy who makes a lot of mistakes, let's not forget this whole story kicks off because he's really he's on this sort of personal mission to investigate what happened to his sister, and he's very sloppy in what he's doing. He's that whole first act of that first episode is him making mistakes and then trying to cover them up.
Yep.
And all of that sets into motion everything that then has since followed, and that's going to continue through the series, I think.
Yeah.
Ben, I'm gonna throw this over to you to talk, ask you about one of the other characters that we're introduced to here, which is Vel, who's played by Faye Marsay, another great bit of casting, another Game of Thrones alum coming in here, the waif, now known as Vel. What'd you make of her introduction and the way her and Cassian interact in this episode?
Yeah, that whole dynamic that you have of you expect Luthen to be kind of in charge, and he is, but it's it continues the theme from the previous episodes of you have reality and you have people trying to cover up reality, trying to create their own false reality to cover up what's actually going on, to create lies to thing. So the whole thing here is Luthen is obviously funding her, is obviously supporting her, giving her people, giving her instructions, but it's all in the name of, well, she's actually the one in charge. He doesn't exist. To her people, she's the one who's actually in command, and in charge of this, and she has to make up this whole story and has to is clearly not on board with Cassian / Clem being there, but also has to argue in his favor. Like that's again incredible acting on her part, and just keeps pulling this up of just these, this whole system of. Again, it's like it kind of goes back to what we've always talked about with, Sith kind of all pretty much tell the truth and the Jedi are kind of liars. In this show, it's like the bad guys, the quote unquote bad guys, they're not lying to each other per se. They're kind of, kind of staying thing. Whereas all the good guys are just, lying through their teeth to get by, to make all this work. And this is another things. And, I like the idea of like the Aldhani crew being something similar to the Ghost crew. They're just a crew of people that are on their planet trying to form their own little rebellion, but perhaps for whatever reason, they're not ready to hear about what's really going on and stuff like that. So I'm curious how this all plays out. How many of them actually survive? Probably not many of them, but I really like her character, that her dynamic of having to sell the whole idea that she's, not a fan of.
Yeah, it was, her introduction. She's so confrontational, first with Luthen and then with Cassian when we first see her with them, and then immediately she goes to defending Cassian and parroting Luthen's points to her crew. She's another one just doing what needs to be done, and like you said, she's fitting in nicely with this sort of crew of this cast of good people doing bad things for good reasons, and bad people or good people doing bad things for good reasons. Like it's a wonderfully gray universe that we found ourselves in, or corner of the galaxy that we found ourselves in.
And it further illustrates like the point that Rogue One tried to drive home, which is that like war is hell, and there's no what is it? There's no innocent bystanders. There's not a lot of everyone's kind of involved has to be in the mud doing this stuff. And to do this rebellion, to actually topple the Empire, what they're trying to do, it's going to take a lot of people, doing a lot of shady stuff. And Cassian is going to be the representation of that in the future.
Yeah, well, and lots of predictions about what the fate of her crew might be, and these guys are potentially risking it all for something that is big, but also something that is, in the grand scheme of things, small.
And to put a stick in the eye of the Empire.
Yeah, but at best, it's going to be a stick in the eye. It's not going to be a knife through the heart. It's
a bunch of people are not going to get paid for a month, probably.
Yeah, and so but they're going to. I remember reading this book about some British spies in World War II in France, and trying to work with the underground resistance there. And at one point, the main person that the book follows has to flee, and then she comes back, and like her whole network is gone. And I have a feeling we might see a bit of that with the rebellion, that, some people who are very dedicated and they're the first ones, they might be among the first ones to stand up. They're going to be gone before the real fight even begins. Yeah. And that maybe these guys, poor Nappy McNapface is first one to go. I'm sorry. I love that guy. He seems like he's the kind of guy you want on your crew, even though he falls asleep. But he's too much of a true believer to survive on a television show.
You can kind of say, oh yeah, maybe Vel was at the Battle of Endor. We just didn't see her, whatever else. I think Luthen would have been a prominent player alongside Mon Mothma and Bail Organa, all those guys, had he survived. I'm not saying I know anything about the future of the show. I'm just saying his days are probably numbered, because he's on the cutting edge of this, and he's probably going to be the first one to get it, which is ironic, being that Mon Mothma, rightfully so, is saying in this episode, look, I'm sticking my neck out for this. I'm going to be the first one to fall if things go wrong. And she's the only one who survives to the end.
Yeah, she's the last one standing. That, as far as we know, it's really easy to sit here when watching a prequel show and say any character whose fate we don't know winds up dead.
And also,
but that's not always the case.
Back to 2009. Ahsoka's gonna die at the end of this Clone Wars show.
I was convinced, 100% convinced that she was.
No way, she's not in Revenge of Sith.
And she probably was going to die. And then Dave Filoni was like, "How could I kill Ashley Eckstein? That I just can't do it."
Well, and it was tremendous job security for him when he decided not to.
Yeah. So it's fascinating stuff. I love the way that these rebels are living. I love how they're basically having to camp and that they've been camping for months on end on this planet.
Eating roots and sleeping on rocks.
Yeah, doing it up. There's another little moment on Aldhani that sort of struck me. TIE fighters are something that's very familiar to us. And, we see them and we go, oh yeah, TIE fighters, yeah, bad guys, Empire, that sort of thing. There was something that felt I felt scared by a TIE fighter or not necessarily scared, intimidated by a TIE fighter for the first time in this episode. Exactly. When it flies through the mountains there, all of a sudden it went from being the goofy ship that we have to take, ships we have to take out to blow up a Death Star, to like, oh, this is an intimidating, item of weapon of war that's used to keep people down.
Subtlety is very important, and we're so used to, and it's getting more and more extreme in Star Wars. All these powers that characters have, it really downplays how dangerous certain weaponry and factions are to the everyday person. But yeah, if you're hiking, a TIE fighter is the typhoon. Like that's pretty. That's
also, the sound editors are the real MVPs here. I was just like, you kind of hear them off the distance. It's very faint, and you don't see them, and just kind of there, and then just boom. That sound that. Is what it's elephants played in a high pitch with mixed with hot wheels, tires on wet pavement. Like that sound, that goofy, ridiculous sound is freaking terrifying in this context.
It really is. It really is. It's just sort of credit to the people making this show, that they can make, they take something that's been around literally since the beginning of Star Wars and show it in a new context and make it scary again, make it intimidating in a way that it probably, I don't know if it ever has been quite as intimidating as it was in that specific context in the episode.
Yeah.
Like even in A New Hope, when we didn't know anything more about it. Right. That's everything I got. About for this episode. Anything else either of you want to bring up before we hit final thoughts and scores out of 10? We've also got a couple of super chats to get to as well.
I think I could spend about 2 more hours just talking about everything.
Ben, are we gonna do Ben's Connection Corner? Do you want me to sing the intro?
I will say, I feel like
it's Ben's Connection Corner. Connections with corner in the corner with Ben. It's Ben's Connection Corner. Do.
I was going to say that I wasn't going to do it this week because I feel like tons of people already done it way better than me on Twitter, and Star Wars Explained, of course, did a magnificent video on it. All the stuff and it's like there's a ton of Easter eggs. No fan service though, guys. No fan service.
None.
No fan service at all on this show. I will just point out, I haven't started anybody to talk about, but I distinctively noticed that David W. Collins is the voice of the ship, of Lutheran's ship, which is a cool thing. He's like the real MVP of like voiceover in Star Wars. The guy's everywhere. Like once you catch his voice, you hear it, stormtroopers and everything.
Yeah. Proxy, he's back.
Yeah.
He's back. All right, let's get to a couple of super chats here from who else? Joel dropping a couple of super chats here. We'll go through them all. They all sort of play on the same theme, so we'll go through them all at once. First up, he says that I'd love for this show to explore rebel groups with different ideologies, groups that don't want to just restore the Republic.
And you have Cassian mention the Seps. Like the Separatists didn't want to restore the Republic. They wanted to take down the Republic. They wanted to secede and be their own thing. Like they definitely, we can assume that the Separatists did have a stake in the rebellion and maybe compromised on some. But it would be very interesting to kind of get that side of things. That that the alliance to the restore of the Republic, is everyone really on board with that? I don't think so.
Yeah, it would be really interesting to see them say, yeah, sure, I hate the Empire, but the Republic wasn't great either. Especially since we know that the New Republic winds up having some similar problems as the old one. Joel also says, I love the old-young divide in the Empire. Most of the older generation will die on the Death Stars, and the younger ones will become the First Order. Ooh. Yeah, First Order has less patience for boardroom scenes, I will say. There's a scene in Rise of Skywalker where Kylo is talking about they're standing around a table. Kylo's there, Hux is there, Pride is there, and they're talking about, whether or not to accept Palpatine's offer. And I remember watching that scene in the theater going like, oh, this is really interesting. I'm glad that they're doing this sort of scene in Star Wars again. They haven't really done. And then Kylo just throws somebody into the ceiling and goes, my knights and I are going hunting. And I'm like, okay, I'd like to see that, sure, but I was really enjoying the boardroom scene. Can we go back to that?
No time for discussion. Get on with the movie.
My knights and I are going hunting. Ghouls. Anyways, and then final one from Joel. Andor is the first Star Wars that doesn't oversimplify the politics, which is something you can say it's done since 1977. Yeah, it's always, the politics have always sort of. What I would say is it's the first one to really foreground it, because it's always been there in the background. It's always been part of the backstory. But this is the first one where we're putting that sort of like, the moving the money around and all that stuff is being put really front and center in a way. I guess Clone Wars did it a little bit, but not quite like this.
And one of the best examples of I'm a big champion of, I think, an underappreciated episode of Clone Wars called Supply Lines. And that episode, it's like, it shows the different tiers of like, okay, here's the Senate, here's what's kind of going on in the political realm, but here's how it's actually affecting real people that are out on the battle lines, stuff like that. And this is kind of head in that direction of like, okay, you got people on the ground that are just trying to make this stuff happen. And you have people up in the upper echelons that are trying to machination this and against, basically doing their own version of what Palpatine is doing. Just Palpatine has all the power and they don't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. All right. Any other points you guys want to bring up about the episode, or should we hit final thoughts and scores out of 10?
Do we think that they're doing any de-aging to Diego Luna in this show? He does look a little bit younger.
Not more than you would normally with any actor in any role. Like I think there are a lot of de-aging that just happens just automatic, post-production. Yeah. And I think that probably might be happening. But I don't know if they're doing it more than, typical.
Yeah. Yeah, nothing is really jumping out at me. It just sort of he looks good. Like I thought, they were sort of hiding his face with the beard for the first couple of episodes. But then he shaved in this one, and still.
It's been 6 years. It hasn't been that long.
Yeah, it's not like Hayden coming back, right? Yeah. Like it's different. It's a different scenario. Diego's still been acting and still looked basically the same since Rogue One came out. So.
Funnily enough, when watching these scenes, the Aldhani scenes in the trailers, I thought those were flashbacks too, but they're not, obviously. So, that's interesting that, just the perception of like I thought they were trying to make Cassian look younger, but they are. It's just, it's not as it's after the earlier stuff with the beard. I think they're doing all right. Well, if they're doing any trickery, I'm not really seeing it, but at the same time, you're not supposed to see it, so who knows?
Yeah. All right. Well, then let's do final thought scores out of 10, and then let's do one news story after that for old time's sake. For old time's sake. All right, Ben, start us off. Final thought score out of 10 for Aldhani.
Oh, I freaking love this episode. I feel like when I finish a discussion like this, and I feel like, how could it be over? We didn't cover any of the really important stuff. We covered so many things, but there's so many other things we could talk about, and there's just too much. And that's one of these episodes, and it's just brilliant. And I think to continue to expand the scope, to go to these different locations, we're dealing with different people, and all this kind of stuff, making it very complicated. Yet, not once did I feel confused. Not once did I feel like, okay, where are we? What are we doing? Who are these people? It's all very well. And I have the, I know what the ISB is. I know what a lot of this stuff is. I'm a big Star Wars fan. I don't know. I would like to talk to someone who has never seen Star Wars before, just watching this stuff, and how can you actually follow this? Is this overly complicated? Is it not? But I personally think it's very well done in regards to showing each individual level of this story, showing the galaxy. And it's amazing that, a show about Cassian Andor, a character we didn't even know a few years ago, would be this window into this world and showing us the true nature of what was going on in the galaxy. We're getting the whole thing. We're not getting Vader, Palpatine, Luke, Leia, whatever. We're not getting any of the major players. We're getting the real people that are doing all this stuff, and we're getting the macro view of what is actually going on and what is building up and where everyone is at this point, where the rebellion is, where the Empire is, and where Mon Mothma is, who will be a major player in the future. So I'm really impressed. This episode truly is magnificent, a masterpiece in and of itself, and I can't wait to see where it goes next week. I will say, man, 9.5. Yeah, that's what I'm going with.
9.5 from Ben. Chris, what about you? Final thoughts, score out of 10.
Yeah, it's hard for me to talk about the show without sounding like the rest of Star Wars isn't as good. Because, it's just, I don't know. Really, the best that I can say is that Star Wars stands on plot and action a lot. Like, Star Wars without plot and action, a lot of times there's not a lot left there. This show is not really plot or action. It's characters. It's 100% characters. Every line of dialogue is interesting, and it's interesting not just for what is being said, but the way it's being said. And that's really rare and special. And I hope that with this approach to making narrative visual stuff, television, whatever they call it now, I hope that this kind of goes into this approach gets transferred to other projects as well, because I just think that it's something that is sometimes missing and Star Wars when there are so many other things to focus on. I'm really glad that the Gilroys and Susanna White have put such a focus on the characters, and this episode continues to show that, because it's like the plot. How could I be really that interested in the plot? We know what's going to happen. Like, if we know that the rebellion's going to be successful, we know where Cassian's going to end up in Rogue One, so there's not as much intrigue here to the plot. What is interesting about this show is how does the plot that already exists, that is already kind of set in stone, how does that affect each of these individual characters? That's what's interesting. How does the Empire and all of the evil that it is affect your everyday officer that is serving the Empire? How does it affect your everyday person living in a town? How does it affect the people that are fighting against it? Like that's really what this show is shaping up to be, is just showing the human element of what the plot of Star Wars is. And I think that's absolutely incredible. It's something that I want to see more of in every Star Wars project. I think it never is a detractor from anything to add more of that element to how it affects people. And so, yeah, the show continues to nail it based on the characters and based on that. So this is going to continue being a 10 out of 10. I at this point, I'm feeling like this show is just going to be a solid 10 out of 10 for me for its run. Like I'm feeling that.
You're setting it up for a fall.
Well, here's the thing is at this point, 4 episodes in, where I have I've never fully been satisfied with something this deep into it. Or there's always been something that has happened where I've been like, oh man, they missed it on this thing. And so far, 4 episodes into the show, we've seen a lot of screen time. We're well more than 2 hours in, and I haven't seen anything that I see as a significant storytelling flaw in this show personally. And weighing that fact, the lack of detractors, to the fact that everything I'm seeing is just positive additions and them doing things better and more advanced in a lot of ways. This show I just feel like the people making this show, they're really, really, really on point. Like, they get filmmaking to an extent that is, I think, a little bit more at an advanced level than what we've seen in a lot of Star Wars. And again, maybe it's because tackling Jedi and lightsabers and Luke Skywalker and Obi-Wan Kenobi is harder because people have expectations. Maybe, it's a lot easier to have all of these new characters and shape them the way you want and tell a story that, is buttoned down a little bit better. Maybe that's what's going on. I don't know. But it's just really, really apparent to me that this episode is a continuation of just really high level good storytelling. And it's the show that I would recommend to a non-Star Wars fan first at this point. Just like Rogue One was a movie I thought would actually work really well for someone who had never seen Star Wars to get them into it. I would recommend this show first. And the thing that I will end with this, that I'm concerned about, is I hope that word of mouth causes this show to have a lot of views from people that would normally not watch Disney Plus shows, because I think it needs it. Because I think that the popularity of Grogu and Obi-Wan Kenobi and Darth Vader, and on the Marvel side of things, the superheroes that were, that IP that was built up through that multi-billion-dollar film franchise over the past decade and a half. Like, I think that they're adversaries that are very formidable for storytelling like this, because while Andor might get really positive reviews and might get a lot of people say this is some of the best stuff on Disney Plus, I think that's going to only come from people who watch it. And regardless of the quality of the other stuff on Disney Plus, there are elements of that make people want to watch it and make people interested in it, just based on this character or the situation that this show Andor doesn't have. So I would implore anybody, watching Andor to talk about it, because not enough people are talking about it right now, because it's so easy to talk about, man, did you see Darth Vader faced off against Obi-Wan again? He sliced the helmet open, and like, it's so easy. That's so viral. It's built for people to take pictures of it and post it on social media. This show isn't. It's very, very subtle, but it's very, very good. And I have no doubt, I think, 20, 30 years down the line, this is going to be the one that people go back to, because it's going to be the one that people's parents and grandparents are going to say, that was the good Star Wars. That was the best Star Wars. But for now, I think it's this is kind of a razor's edge right now. I don't know where it's going to fall. It's very possible that this might go the way of Firefly and just be like something really good that ended up being a flash in the pan. And I'm really concerned about that right now. But it's a 10 out of 10.
Yeah, well, it's a numbers game, like you said, and we'll see how this sort of shakes out. But I'm feeling optimistic about where this goes. I think the fact that they're consistently bringing in more and different filmmakers to play in other areas of the galaxy other than just the Mandoverse, I think bodes well that there are going to be shows that aren't necessarily spy thrillers like this one, but that will play by a similar vibe. And not to put too much pressure on a show that's still at least a year away. Look at The Acolyte and feel like that might be another one that fits into this category, but we'll see. That's a conversation for another day.
I think this show is evidence of just letting a filmmaker do their thing, of letting Tony Gilroy come in and do his Bourne identity, Michael Clayton, whatever thing in Star Wars. And I want to see more of that with other filmmakers. I would love, I'm still in love with the idea of Taika Waititi coming in and doing his thing in a Star Wars movie. Like, I want to see more of this.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And to be fair, Mandoverse is very much Jon Favreau doing his thing.
And it's very Filoni too.
And very Filoni too. So, we are maybe, again, starting to see that promise be fulfilled of the, the original sort of, Disney Star Wars purchase of like, we're going to have all different types of Star Wars from all different types of filmmakers, and you'll be able to pick and choose what you like. And if you like this, then great. If you do, you can watch it. If you don't like it, well, just wait a couple of months and we'll have something else for you. For me, I'm going to give this one an 8. I'm going to give this one a 9 out of 10. Really, really strong episode. I don't really have any complaints against it. I'm just giving it a 9 because I figure there's going to be something better that'll be a 10. That's my logic at this point. I'm working my way up. I started like 8.5. Now I'm 9.5. I figure by the next episode will be 10. Then it'll be 11. It'll just blow my mind. The 12th. The 7th episode. Yeah, and if they keep casting more people from Game of Thrones, then sure, and throwing a few more Taskmaster people, why not? I'll keep bringing them along. But I love what they're doing with Cassian, love what they're doing with Lutheran, love what they're doing with Mon Mothma, love what they're doing with Vel, and love what they're doing with Cyril and Deidre and everybody, all through the Empire. Very, very good stuff. Very, very happy. Very, very much looking forward to next week. And I will just answer this question from the chat, Matt asking, what is going on in my background?
That's exactly what I was wondering.
You may or may not have noticed that it is not a Star Wars background. But again, it is a nod to Mr. Ben Bailey Smith, a.k.a. Doc Brown, the comedian, and his time on my other favorite TV show, Taskmaster. This is a sequence from Taskmaster. It's the live task from, I think this is from season 11, which is not Ben's season, but I just thought I'd throw that up there because it also had its season premiere this week, and very excited to watch that. It's a British comedy show.
I was gonna say, is Taskmaster like competitive TaskRabbit?
I don't know what TaskRabbit is, but probably.
So then I
probably.
would say TaskRabbit is the real life Taskmaster.
I'm gonna assume that that's the case. I don't know, but that's what it is. But season 14 premiered today. I haven't watched the premiere yet. Very excited to do so. Once we're done this.
You know how, if you want a hamburger, you can go on your phone and be like, give me a hamburger, and then someone shows up at your door with a hamburger. Well, let's say that you get a shelf and you don't want to build it. You go on your phone and say, I need someone to build the shelf, and then someone just shows up at your house and builds the shelf.
No, it'd be more like if you said, I need you to build this shelf, but you can't use a hammer, nails, screws, but here's some silly putty, toilet paper.
That's the comedy part, yes.
Yes.
Which of course you could do. You could have someone come on TaskRabbit, and then you could have them use silly putty to put your IKEA shelf together, and you could just watch and laugh the whole time.
Yes, and then you show it to a tyrant character who then gets to score you based on how well you did. So
makes sense.
Makes perfect sense. It's a great show. It's genuinely. We're coming up on like peak television for me because we got Andor, House of the Dragon, Taskmaster, the baseball playoffs, and the start of the hockey season all happening at the same time. Ooh. Oh, these next few weeks are everything I want out of television.
That's awesome.
Okay, let's do some news. Let's do one news story. This was the big thing. It was a Vanity Fair article written by Anthony Bresnikan this week. Here is the headline: Darth Vader's voice emanated from war-torn Ukraine. You may have seen variations on this story as saying something about James Earl Jones retiring, and that there's a the AI voice doing Darth Vader from here on out, essentially. But it sort of loses. If I were Bresnikan, I might be a little bit sort of like, guys, I put so much work into this really engaging human interest story, and all you took from it was that, James Earl Jones isn't going to actively be Darth Vader anymore.
He thought that he could put that in there and not have that be the thing that people talk about.
Oh no, I know that's and I'm sure he knows that as well. But this actual, like, if you've seen all of the stories, like the stories about James Earl Jones retiring and the Vader voice being AI and all that stuff, and you're thinking like, oh, I know what this is, go and actually read the Vanity Fair article, because it's really quite something. Because Lucasfilm, as they did with Luke's voice in the Book of Boba Fett and The Mandalorian, they didn't have Mark Hamill or some other actor voice him. They used technology to recreate what Luke's voice would have sounded like saying those lines back in the 80s. And James Earl Jones, man's in his 90s now. If he does, if he wants to retire or just feels like his voice doesn't sound the same as it did in 1980, whatever, that's fair enough. Fair enough to him. He shouldn't have to continue to be Darth Vader. So they use this technology, but the firm that they hired to do it is called Respeecher, and it's based out of Ukraine. And we all know what happened in the Ukraine earlier this year and is still happening with the Russian invasion. And so these guys that were working on Obi-Wan Kenobi, that were working on Darth Vader's voice for Obi-Wan Kenobi, were doing that, knowing that war was coming, and we're putting the finishing touches on it during the early stages of the invasion, which is really incredible. It's one of those things where you read about it and you're like in awe. As a Star Wars fan, we should be grateful. But you're also like, that's what you were doing? There were people were invading your country, and you were working on Star Wars. Oh my God. Like it's an incredible story, and these guys who did it are incredibly brave, and thankfully for now are safe. But it's excuse me. Sorry. Like I said, sick all week, and I'm starting to fade here.
Shadow, why is this?
Yeah, it's really incredible technology. I don't know. I kind of suspected that's what was going on with Obi-Wan Kenobi, even though they were just crediting James Earl Jones, that it was the AI stuff.
They had to do it anyway because of the meshing with James's voice and Hayden's voice. Like, obviously that was some form of filtering and technology and AI already. So this is just a little bit of a step beyond that. But I mean, I had this theory, once we started getting, these CGI characters like Tarkin and Rogue One. And I think this is further evidence to my theory that the actors that we grew up with in our generation are going to be the actors for hundreds of years, and it's just going to be supplemented through technology, both visually and audially. And I think that's the thing that you can experience people who lived hundreds and thousands of years ago now only through things like words that they wrote. Like, we knew what, Shakespeare wrote, and that's how we experienced Shakespeare. We barely know what he looked like accurately. And then now, you move a little bit further in time and you talk about people that were around in the 19th century. Well, we know what they looked like, but we don't know what they sounded like. Then you move forward, you know what they sounded like. You move forward a little bit more. You know what visually they looked like as they were moving around because we have videos of them. Move a little bit further. You have not just black and white, but color versions of what they look like. It's just an advance of technology where we get closer and closer and closer to the people that existed in the past. And AI is an extension of that. And I think at every level, it freaks people out. Like I remember, this might be a very unique experience, but I mean, I do remember as a kid, there were some people that were freaked out by being filmed or having photographs taken of them in general. In general, there were some people that I remember coming across, people from older generations, people from different, countries and cultures that I came across of as a kid, who just was like, nope, don't take a picture of me. Don't take a video of me. I don't want to have myself presented like that to the world or other people. There's that same uneasiness that people are going to have about AI. Obviously, there's a lot of uneasiness about AI art and what that means for the art community, that computers now can make art that potentially could sell just as well as something meticulously made by a human. It's the same thing. So it's going to be uncomfortable, but it's going to happen regardless of how uncomfortable people are. And it's just a prediction that I'm making as almost a philosopher. Like, this version of reality that we have, everyone that's going to come after us is going to be much more intimately familiar with us and our culture than we are with previous cultures. Like, they're going to be able to read all of our tweets, see all of these podcasts, and I would not be surprised if they will be able to recreate us in AI form to a certain extent. Like, someone is going to be able to, a few hundred years into the future, say, I want to have a conversation with this podcaster that existed many, many generations ago. And they're going to plug it into a computer, and that computer is going to generate us having a conversation with them. That is totally going to happen. There's nothing stopping it.
I mean, there's enough audio from this podcast alone that I'm sure all of our voices could be recreated in various stages of our lives.
By the way, hi, my future great grandkids. Hi, how's it going? Yes, I was a weirdo. Your great great times 10 grandfather was kind of a weirdo. Sorry.
Also, I don't want to gloss over the fact that, Chris, you just called yourself a philosopher. So I was trying to look up if there was a philosopher name generator to see what yours would be. I can't find one. Does such a thing does not exist. So
weren't philosophers just name called?
But I wanted to come up with give you a good ancient sounding name to. We can inscribe upon a tablet somewhere.
I mean, well, Christopher is actually an ancient Greek name, so there you go.
Christonov. I was trying to come up with a Star Warsy something, whatever. Yeah. Anyway,
to bring this back to Star Wars really quick, I will just say the one reason I think I really, really liked Vader in Obi-Wan Kenobi, I think, was because they used the re-speecher, but also the fact that it made sense to recreate someone's voice using technology and AI, because that's literally what's happening in the movie. It's a voice changer. It's taking Anakin Skywalker's voice and changing it into Darth Vader's. That's literally what's happening. It's a robotic voice, so it makes sense. And I think as much as I don't know, there is maybe a few moments where it could be heard as weird. I think it's near perfect. I think it's even better than some of the stuff where James Earl Jones is actually doing the performance, a la Rogue One or whatever. And I will also say that I'm not the biggest fan of what was going on with Luke Skywalker in The Mandalorian and the Book of Boba Fett. Even though I think it's very, very, very impressive, I'm not saying I want to that to keep going and that's perfect technology. But at the same time, it's only going to get better. And if they can make a robotic voice sound, or a semi-robotic voice sound good, and a human voice sound pretty good, it's only up from here. This is newfound territory, and like Chris is saying, it's only up from here. This stuff's not going anywhere.
I'd sort of be interested to see if these guys, these guys in Ukraine, if they if they took a stab at, Luke or some of these other characters and see what they could come up with and see if it would be different, better, worse than the previous iterations. But I don't know. I'm for some reason with Vader, I'm really okay with it, even though there are lots of people out there that can do the Vader voice. But I'd still rather. I agree with what you're saying, in a philosophical sense, Chris. That this is where all this is going. But I personally, as I've said before, I prefer we just recast these things. But that's a topic for another day.
More machine than man, literally.
It's a topic for another day. But again, I will just say the original story is incredible. It's worth reading. I was going to read a paragraph from it just to give you a sense, but I'm realizing my own voice isn't going to hold up through a whole paragraph of something right now. So I will leave it be and just again reiterate the point that the clickbait articles don't do it justice. The original story is incredible and is much deeper than just the grabby headline portion of James Earl Jones retires from Darth Vader, which is a big story, not in and of itself, huge story. And James Earl Jones has given us so much incredible content over the years as Vader, so many incredible performances as Vader that he deserves a retirement. It deserves a great retirement.
People in Ukraine risking their lives to recreate the voice of a legendary actor and put it on a Star Wars TV show. And all y'all are out there, with your Twitter one-liners. He's more machine now than man. Like, come on.
That's funny.
There you go. All right, that's it. That's the news. That's all we got. That's all we got. All right. I think with that, we can begin to wrap things up for this week.
All right. We want to thank everybody so much for watching and listening to the show. Of course, we'll be back with another episode next week. But until then, you can find us on social media at the SWU. Dominic, thank you so much for hosting.
It's my pleasure, as always. Great fun getting into this episode and just so looking forward to next week. And hopefully I won't be sick then, so I'll be able to think a little bit straighter in the lead up and not sound raspy and not... I hope I hit the cough button every time. I'm afraid I missed it once or twice, but...
It was only the time you were literally in the middle of talking.
Okay, good.
No other option.
Okay,
That was
good.
the only time. Everything else,
good.
Perfect.
Great. So, but hopefully I won't have to hit the cough button at all next week. So hopefully it'll be good. But yeah, can't wait for next week's Andor. Can't wait to talk about it on next week's show. Can't wait to do all of this again in 7 days' time.
2 days prior to next week's episode, I will be going to my first packed, sold-out concert. So since COVID, so I'm putting my odds at not being sick is pretty low.
Oh, I made it through 7, so
nice.
That's it might be okay. It might be okay.
That sounds great. So we'll find out. Everyone in Utah, please use good hygiene over the next several days, and don't go to a concert if you're sick, please.
That is the key.
Have we learned nothing from the past 80 years or 4 years, how long it's been?
I mean, sadly, Ben, the answer seems like it's no.
So you can follow Dominic's wellness journey, including his posts about teas.
What?
Teas to make his voice better. The honey infused tea.
What? What? Follow Dominic J25 for wellness tips.
That's right. How to get better from being sick.
You're gonna update us on this, right? You're gonna update us to the weekend.
Sure. Yeah. Sure. I'll tell you. You know what I've been drinking? Water.
That's right. There's lots of posts about how healthy it is to drink water while you're sick.
I'm a real hydro homie. I love the stuff.
There's this newfangled thing called H2O. You may not have heard of it, but it's real good. And it's really good to take care of you.
That's right. Hydrogen
God.
dioxide.
What have we
Oh,
done?
wait.
Ben, that's the new segment along with Ben's Connection Corner.
No, please God.
Ben hypes up water.
Oh gosh, millennials use peer pressure to encourage each other to drink dihydrogen oxide.
Whoa, whoa, man, make that into a TikTok trend.
Yes. Yes, Dominic J25. Ben, thank you for hosting as well.
Oh, this was a pleasure as always up until about 5 seconds ago. Yeah, it's great. Andor is getting better every week. I'm glad we got many more weeks of this to discuss all what's going down. And I genuinely don't know, because we're getting through a lot of the trailer footage. A lot of the trailer footage has been in the past 4 episodes. So I'm like, at a certain point, we're going to get into uncharted territory. I'm very excited about that. But in the meantime, yeah, can't wait to do it all in 7 days' time.
Eat. At Ben Hart with no.
Show was so good for 2 hours and 20 minutes.
And we just lost our minds in the past 5.
Then it got stupid.
Stop being ageist against.
You're the oldest one here. What are you talking about?
Yes, I'm embracing the lingo of the younger generation.
How do you do, fellow kids?
That's right. Ain't it swell?
Boy, this show sure is hip.
That's right. It is.
It's hella fleek, yo.
Oh yes, totally on fleek, fam.
Do you want? Should we just end the show? Should I just click turn the show off?
Okay. At Seekell is where you can find me on Twitter. Subscribe, super chat, become a channel member, join the SWU Network Discord, email us at swunderworld@gmail.com, leave us a review, and make sure to tune in 7 days.
All right. Don't you just... Nobody's gonna say "May the Force be with you"? Do we just abandon that part?
Oh yes,
Drink water.
and also
May the Force be with you.
for Dom and Ben and all the other great folks at the Star Wars Central, my name is Chris, and may the Force be with you.
Is it a wrap? I'm not sure. You tell me. You tell me.
No, it's a sandwich.
It's a panini.